Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us here on Time2Shine, the podcast. It's been quite a while,
Yeah.
a long journey. We've been back and forth from one place to another, but we're finally here. Obviously, a different setting because we're working on construction, we're working on a lot of different things. So we're just trying to, record wherever we can because we just couldn't go without sharing certain messages that we have. So, hope that you guys are okay with the setting. We put too much thought into these things. We gotta kind of be a little more laid back.
Yeah.
I'll work on that. But today we're going to talk about something very interesting, and that is the difference, or is there a difference between faith and trust? Here, where we are in our property, we've been starting a ministry as well as living on the property. So, a lot of the things that we're doing present this challenge of us having to move forward in faith and then having to balance out trust, and we're just kind of juggling it all and trying to figure it out. Well, today we want to talk about that. Is there any sort of difference between faith and trust, or are they the same thing? So let's get into it.
Let's get into it. Ding, 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 ding,
Yeah.
ding.
All right.
So I have here a question as usual for you. It says here, how much do you trust in God?
So I'd like to think that I trust God significantly. Obviously, I know that as we grow in Christ, our trust in Him will grow. So it all depends on our relationship. If I have a strong relationship with God, I trust in God a lot. If I don't have a close connection with God, then my trust in Him isn't going to be as strong as maybe someone else. But I'll explain that a little bit with some examples as we go in. I don't want to just throw everything all at the
Okay.
first shot, but I'll explain this. How much do I trust in God? All right.
So you have a quote there you want to share?
Yeah, I have a quote that I wanted to start with, and it's found in Acts of the Apostles, a very interesting book that kind of explains the New Testament in a story-like setting. And in page 242 of this book, it says this: "The faith of the consecrated worker is to stand every test brought to bear upon it. God is able and willing to bestow upon his servants all the strength they need, to give them the wisdom that their varied necessities demand. He will more than fulfill the highest expectations of those who put their trust in him." Okay, so the reason why I wanted to share this quote is because it basically talks about what we're trying to do here. And I know a lot of people are trying to, there's preppers, there's self-sustaining groups out there. There's all kinds of people that are just trying to figure some alternative to life apart from just relying on the government and the systems and the whole rat race and all these different things. We are obviously Christian based. Oh, my notes. Sorry about that, guys. We're obviously Christian based, so we try and do things as best as we can according to the instructions that God gives us, right? So we're trying to prepare for whatever this world is going to show us. We believe that God is coming soon, and that means there's a crisis that has to take place in this world before that happens. So we want to prepare for that crisis, whether that means living in the country instead of living in the city, whether that means having our own provisions like gardening and having fruit trees that we've planted in our channel, A Little Heaven on Earth. We've demonstrated how to plant fruit trees, a method that God instructed. um, so many different things that we're trying to do, but all of these different things that we're trying to do to keep our family in a more peaceful environment, a more secure, secluded environment, requires a lot of faith and a lot of trust in God. And this quote says here that if we do things God's way, he will fulfill the highest expectations. So you know me, I'm one that loves to plan. I love planning, right? I always have a new idea to explore, a new thing I want to do. I never stop thinking of trying new things, right? I'm always with an idea for this property. And what this inspiration is telling us is that even our highest expectations, the things that we desire the absolute most, if it's in God's will, if we trust him, he'll surpass that. Now let that sink in for a moment. Whatever you desire, if it's in accordance to God's will, He can and is able to surpass even that expectation that you have. So now the question goes back to you guys. How much do you trust God? Because I like to think that I trust God a certain amount and I want my trust to grow. But God has already got us this far. And where are we now? And where do we come from? Why don't you explain a little? Give a recap of what we've been sharing in our previous podcasts of our transition all the way to here.
Well, we came from Canada. Like
Yeah,
from
yeah.
there,
Just quick
we
steps.
came from Canada. We sold all our belongings, the ones that obviously weren't needed. We shipped half of our other stuff here. We were looking for a property. We took a couple of months to find this property. A lot of prayer, a lot of frustration, not knowing why God wasn't showing us when we were looking and doing His will. But I guess throughout that time, we were practicing patience, and we need a lot of that. And then I guess now that we're here, we're we have a lot of
Work to do.
work to do, little projects here and there, but our main focus is to prepare our ministry on our outpost that we will be having and sharing later on.
Well, it's preparing both physically and
Yeah, and
spiritually.
spiritually.
In Time to Shine, the Present Truth Ministries, this is just a branch of this ministry, a podcast that we have. I'm presenting a series on precepts and examples. And in that series, it's to explain how to prepare both spiritually and physically. So on one channel with A Little Heaven on Earth, which we're no longer going to be streaming these podcasts on that channel is going to specifically just focus on the examples. So the lifestyles, the habits, the projects that we're working on, we're going to demonstrate and
our homestead,
show our homestead and our lifestyle. And here on the ministry channel, Time to Shine Present Truth Ministry, we're both going to share the podcast and the teachings, the sermons that we do through the ministry. So if you want to tune into both, you have to be able to subscribe to both channels because we're not going to stream this no longer on both, only on this platform. But as we've been going through all those things, it took a lot of faith and a lot of trust. So it got me to thinking, are they both the same or are they different? What do you think?
I think they're different.
They're different because you saw my notes, or you're just
No, I believe that they're different.
Okay, so I'm gonna explain it. You're right, and if you guys were thinking they were different, you were right too. Congratulations. So what actually happens is this: first, we need to have faith. Then we need to trust. All right. First, you have faith, and then you trust. A lot of people are fixated on having faith.
But then they don't
they don't apply that faith, which is the trust aspect. So then they say, "Oh, I have faith in God. Why isn't this happening to me?" They seem to think that it's all this mental thing. If I just like squeeze my brain hard enough, things are going to happen. And it doesn't work like that. First, we need to have faith, then comes the trust. Now we're going to explain what the difference of the two is.
So does this fall back on that saying, faith without works is
faith
dead?
Without works is dead. Yes, that kind of works together with it. That helps to explain it and expand it a little more. But I want to first go to Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 and 6. Can you read that? Do you have your Bible?
This is my favorite quote, yes, but I wrote it here. So it says, "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy path."
Now, this is a scripture that we've even got our kids to memorize, and we've repeated it to them over and over and over again. This whole concept of trusting in God in every single thing that we do, not just in some things or in the things that we choose, but in all areas of life, to learn how to trust in God. Now, why are we bringing this verse up, and how does this teach us that there's a difference between trust and faith? Well, it says that first of all, we have to trust in God, and we have to trust Him in all our ways. So it's not in all our thoughts, it's not in all we hear, but it's in all we do. So that already kind of gives us an indication that trust is slightly different than faith, because faith is the evidence of things not
Not
yet seen,
seen.
right? And so I'm going to break this down a little bit, but first let's ask our question here, because we have a question here.
Why do people confess having faith in God with trusting in God?
So why do people confuse
Oh,
correction?
sorry. My bad. Yeah, why do people confuse having faith in God with trusting in God?
So here's the question we want to
Sounds
break
better.
down. Yeah. Sounds a little better when you
Didn't
read it the
sound
right way.
right.
That's okay. That's okay. So people do confuse it, and they think they're both the same. So they think because they have faith, they're automatically trusting in God, and they think if they're trusting in God, they automatically have faith. But the Bible says that when Jesus comes, will he find faith in this earth? Will he find faith in this earth? So there's going to be a very little bit of people
Faith?
present living on the earth when Jesus comes that actually have faith, which means that how many people are actually going to be trusting in God to do things his way? Because, like I said, first comes faith, then comes trust.
I think it also has a lot to do with, I remember my great grandmother. She always used to say, God is coming, God is coming. And she was a very spiritual person. And now my grandmother is a very spiritual person, for many of you who know her. And it's like, okay, she's been saying God is coming, and where is God? So I think along the way, people either lose their faith or lose their hope and say it's just a saying, that, okay, God is coming, whatever. Like, it's just people putting that in their head. And is there
Yeah.
really a God? So I think it has a lot to do with that too.
So so here's how we'll explain it, and it's very very basic language arts. All right. So currently we're doing homeschooling with our kids, and our daughter Valentina is has been going through this process back and forth until she finally grasps it, the difference between nouns and verbs.
Oh,
And she's still in that phase of kind of mixing the two up, but she's getting very close to understanding it, getting very close to like nailing it really well. But verbs and nouns are two different things. A noun is the person, place, or thing. A verb is an action
action
word.
word.
Guys, I'm doing well with my teaching here. I remember the lessons I'm teaching her. I'm actually learning too as we teach her, right? You're
Welcome,
learning, I'm learning. Well,
welcome
not
aboard.
learning, but we're being reminded of
Yeah.
the things that we've once learned so long ago. But it's good. It's good to know these things, nouns and verbs. Why? Because when we look at the Bible, and remember the verse that we just mentioned about faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not yet seen. That's found in Hebrews 11, I believe, right? So let's look at the words that describe faith, all right? Because in language arts, once again, in order to understand these things, there's descriptive words, which is what we're teaching our daughter, descriptive words. So what are some of the descriptive words in that text? We have evidence, and we have substance. Substance and evidence are the two words found in that scripture that help us to indicate that faith is a noun, which means it's a thing.
Something that
It's
you
it's
possess.
something. It's something possessed,
Yeah.
something that you have.
Yeah.
So it's a thing, it's something. All right? Now is trust the same?
No.
So faith is a belief, it's a reliability, it's confidence in something unseen. So for instance, faith in God, it's a reliance in God, it's confidence in God, it's a belief in God. But that's something, it's something, it's a noun, right? It's something. Trust isn't that. Trust is something totally different. Trust is actually a verb. And a verb, remember what we said, a verb is an action
Action
word.
word.
So what does that mean?
Something to do or act
Something that you have
upon.
to do. Yeah, something you act upon. So it's not a thing, but it's acting upon that thing.
That you.
Exactly. So that's why I was telling everyone first comes faith, then
Then
comes
comes
trust.
trust.
So faith is the thing. Now that you have faith, trust is acting upon that faith. So this
So
is where when we were talking about faith and works.
so give us an example of what you just said.
Oh,
Faith and then act upon that. So, like, for us, give an example for, like, in our
So
journey.
I'll give an example of it's an example that, sorry, we have our little friend here, Oliver. If you guys have been watching our episodes on Little Heaven on Earth,
It's okay.
you know who he is. Anyways, we'll let him roam around here. So I'll give an example that I've used many times in some of my sermons. All right, I think I've shared this example at least like 3 or 4 times in my sermons, not in all the recorded ones, but previously. But it's basically this. We used to live in Ontario, and in Ontario, there's the border between Ontario and I forget the United States part. Anyways, I'm not very good with geography. When we get to that part of the lesson with our kids, I'll nail it. But anyways, there's Niagara Falls. Okay, that's the important part. Now, a story of Niagara Falls that I tend to share regularly is of a man named Blondin in 1859. He was the first person to do the tightrope cross along the bridge. Now, he had a pole and he would walk on a tightrope all the way across the bridge. And he did like extremely like
I think that's a famous.
dangerous. Yeah, it's famous. You could see it
People know about that.
all over history on internet and everything. But this is the example that I want to share because he did all kinds of incredible things. He carried a wheelbarrow across on a tightrope. He carried all kinds of different things, heavy weight stuff, things that seemed ridiculously impossible. He made possible. All right. And he kept doing it over and over and over again. And every time he would take something else, something more extreme on the rope with him over the bridge, he would always ask the people, "Do you believe that I can do this?" If because they've seen him do it the first time just with a pole, they believed he could go there, he could flip and continue on. They believed he could carry a wheelbarrow over and he'd be fine. And he kept asking them over and over again, "Do you guys believe that I can do this? Do you guys have faith that I'm able to get across safely?" And all the crowd kept saying what?
Yes.
Yes, of course. We've seen you do it before. We have faith that you can do it again. So there was one time in August, one of the last few trips that he did there, he switched it up on everyone. He said, "Okay, if you guys all believe that I can do it, who's willing to jump into the wheelbarrow with me?"
Nobody did.
Everyone was afraid.
Yeah.
Everyone was afraid. So that means they had faith, but they didn't trust enough in him.
Yeah, yeah.
Now there's one man that actually went, not in the wheelbarrow, but he jumped on his back. All right? He jumped on top of his back, and Blondin carried him all the way across on his back. That's insane. And I'd say that is trust because he had faith. He knew that he can do it, but he put that faith into action. He got involved. He put himself at the mercy of this man that proved himself over and over again that he was capable. Now here's something interesting that I have a quote of what Blondin said to this man. This man by the name goes Harry Concord. Harry Concord. It was actually his manager, his agent that would kind of book his tours, his things. And this is what Blondin said to him. Very powerful words. So pay attention. It says this: "Look up, Harry." Just that alone. Look up. Imagine when we're talking about faith and trust, the only way to make it possible is looking up. If he were to look down, he'd be so scared.
Yeah.
He would panic. He would get worried, as I would too, as almost everyone would.
You think he ever looked down?
You're like thousands of feet or meters high, and you look down at a bridge that's like just crashing water.
You think he ever looked down?
I don't know if he did or if he didn't.
Maybe like.
But the council was Blondin said, "Look up, Harry." All right, he knew him. He said, "Look up, because I don't want you to get afraid and then put both of our lives in danger." He said, "Look up. Until I clear this place, be a part of me." So until I get to the other side, you and me are like this. You're no longer you, you're me. We're together. Whatever movements, everything is united. All right. He continues by saying this: until I clear this place, be a part of me, mind, body, and soul. If I sway with me. Do not attempt to do any balancing yourself.
That's actually a really good quote.
Yep, and that's why I keep going back to this example here.
And meditating.
Because it's so spiritually connected.
Yeah.
If we want to be able to trust God, to get on his back, to let him carry us, because we've seen and experienced that God is capable. The Bible tells us God is able to do the impossible. We believe it. We have faith in it. That's the noun. But what about the verb? How are we going to put that trust in
In
action?
action.
Right? It's by doing this. Look up until we get to the end of the line. If I sway, sway with me.
So actions speak louder than words?
It's in a sense, yes, but it's not so much about actions versus words, but it's put the focus on the actions, because the actions are what demonstrates how much you really trust
How
God.
much you.
Because the question you gave to me was, how much do you trust God, right? And I'm trying to break it down on what it actually means to trust God, because I could say I trust God, but or people could say they trust God, but if they don't even actually understand what that means, then do they really trust God?
I think,
Trusting God is putting it into action.
I think when we say, "Oh yeah, I trust God will do that," do you really trust? I don't think people really understand the meaning of trust until they actually, like you said, put it into action. Because it's very easy to say, "Oh, if it's God will, I trust." But are you doing anything? Are you acting upon that trust? Because anyone could say that.
So I'm going to give you a simple example, and this goes with many how do you say it? Many life coaches use this format and example for illustration purposes, right? And just an example, I've done this in one of the churches that I've shared messages before, and I actually did this illustration with several of the members there. It worked out really well. I was actually impressed. So I did it was a marriage seminar, and I was kind of trying to give the illustration of, like, the companions, the husband and wife, they need to be able to have trust in each other. And how do you show that you have trust in each other? So I made both the husband and the wife stand in front of me, and I think everyone knows this example, the falling backwards example.
Oh yeah.
And the other person holds their arms out, and you have to trust that they're going to catch you.
Yeah.
So trusting means, it doesn't mean that, okay, if we were to do this here, and I were to say fall back, I would catch you, right?
Yeah.
I would catch you. That's faith. But actually falling back and letting me catch you, that's trust. So you see the difference. You know that I will catch you. That's faith. But actually falling backwards and letting me catch you is what trust is. You see how the actions are involved in it.
It's a really good example.
So first there's the faith. If you never knew that I have the ability to catch you, you wouldn't trust in me. For example, I'm about 150, 160 pounds.
We should try that after.
I wouldn't have enough faith that my children would be able to catch me.
That's different.
So I wouldn't trust them to do that exercise with them.
I wouldn't be able to.
You might not even be able to, because you don't have the strength to hold my weight.
No.
Okay? But that's just because of your size.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that I don't trust you. There's certain things that I know you're not capable of, but there's definitely things that I know I can trust you in.
Yeah.
Right? But with God, He has the ability and the capability of everything and anything, which means that's why the Bible says that to trust in the Lord with all of your heart,
and lean not on your
own understanding, in
all
all your ways. So every
Him.
single thing, we know that we can trust Him, which means that we should do our part in everything according to His ways.
So now that we're talking about the, like, trusting, sometimes we trust, like we're talking about it, and we see God doing miracles in our lives, and yet we always have that that doubt. So if we think about back in the Bible, the story of the when they were in the desert, and they had
the children of Israel.
The children of Israel, they had that pillar of fire during the day and the night, and those were evidence of things that they actually saw, and they always had doubts. So how do we? So
God kept demonstrating His power to them to increase their faith.
But those were things that they saw. And
yes.
Yet now,
so that was to increase their faith.
Yes.
However, God didn't just do that.
He did a lot of things.
Remember, when you look at the Bible, if we're going to talk about the children of Israel, the first thing God did was He opened the Red Sea, and they had their enemy behind them, and God took over that situation, and He destroyed the enemy. When they were out in the desert, there was a time they were encountered with another enemy. Right? Do you remember? The how do you say it in English? I remember in Portuguese. I think it's the Amalekites.
Amalekites.
The Amalekites came and they attacked the children of Israel. And this time, God didn't say, "Step back, I'm going to take over." This time, God said, "I want you guys to fight. I want Moses, Aaron, and to go up on the mountain, and to Moses holds his hands up, and the other two are helping to hold his hands up. And as he's praying, interceding, they were to do what? Their part in fighting, and God would give them deliverance." So we have faith that God shows his power to increase our faith. God shows that he's capable of things to increase our faith, but that doesn't mean that we trust him yet. Then God leaves us in situations of difficulty to test our trust in him.
Yeah.
Are we going to do it? Even though we don't have all the answers, we know he's capable of it. Now, are we going to move forward? Are we going to continue in the path that he's calling us? That's trust. So he gives us evidence, but then sometimes he leaves us with difficulties to test our trust. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right, so let's move forward. What's the next question?
So the next question,
It's more of like a statement that I have here.
So you have not trusting has more to do with A, feeling like we have everything under control, or B, we secretly fear that God doesn't ...
All right, so this is something that you guys can answer down in the comments below, or you can just reflect on it. All right, so which one is it more? Not trusting in God, does it have more to do with we feel like we have everything under control, or we just don't trust that God has everything under control? I think it's a bit of both.
Yeah.
And it could be like a big mixture of the two. Some people can say, you know what, if I'm going to be sincere with myself, I always feel like I have everything under control because, I'm good at planning, I'm good at strategizing, I'm good at organizing, and it's almost like, we feel like we have it all figured out. And because of that, God is left out of the picture, or God is left to option B or C or D or whatever it is, and he's not the first.
Or people just don't believe in God.
Well, there's always that, but we're kind of referencing believers here, people that do have some sense of the supremacy of God in their life and are seeking the guidance, his guidance in their life, right? But then there's also that group where they might not admit it, and I've been there too at some times in my life. We might not admit it, but demonstrating by the way we act and how we talk and what we're experiencing and all these different dynamics, it's almost like we secretly fear that God doesn't have everything under control. It's almost like we're going backwards. So you know how sometimes a lot of people like to say, I made one step forward, then two back.
Yeah.
And it feels like I'm never growing or I'm never advancing. That's the very reason why. And it's hard for us to admit it because admitting it means that we never really believed in God. We never trusted in God. And we've always been lying to ourselves this whole time. That's why the Bible says the heart is deceptively wicked. Who can know it? Because we can deceive our very selves to thinking that we trust God enough. And yet we don't. And that's why we're only one step forward, two steps back. And then one step forward, and then two steps back. And it seems like we're getting further from God rather than getting closer to God. But the simple solution to all that is see the power of God, build your faith. And then when God gives you that ability to fully believe that he's capable, start doing your part. As we work together with God, we're going to see things moving out of our way and also things moving in our direction that need to take place. And we're going to see God's hand working together with it all. So
you have a quote here again from your
Nelson Mandela. He made an interesting quote. Share that quote with us. It always
seems impossible until it's done.
Now explain that to me. What does that mean? It always seems impossible until it's done.
Well, I'll give you an example of our yurt.
That seemed like it was never going to get done.
We did a video of it. And let's just say, my husband here does not like to read instructions, which we'll get to that. That's what it is.
Okay.
So, let's just say that he winged it. Everything that he's been doing, he's been winging it because he thinks, okay, he just has a picture in his mind and then he does it.
See, the instructions are all in my head.
Yeah, but I'm not done yet. So
But I believe it's going to work out because the instructions are in my head.
So once he does it, and then he figures that something is not like clicking there, something is wrong, he then decides to go to the instruction page, and then he realizes what he did wasn't supposed to be done that way. So it took us a couple of days, I guess, aside from having to wait for the rocks to be delivered, to realize that what he did, he didn't need to do none of that. So he did more than he was supposed to do.
Okay, let's just say I did plan A and then A didn't work out, so I scratched it out. I went to plan B.
Yeah.
And that kind of worked out a little better. But realistically,
It got done.
plan C would have been the best, but we never got to plan C.
It got done.
Because I tried to do things winging it, doing it my own way. Just to say that, you know what, when you try doing things your own way, you might get there. You might. But it's going to be a lot harder. You're going to have a lot more bumps down the road.
You're going to sweat a lot more.
It's not worth it.
Yeah.
So just jump straight to option C, option Christ, and you'll get there a lot easier, a lot faster than just going with option A and option B. Just take option C and let Christ lead you all the way.
And then you have a memory verse here.
I have verse Psalms 91. The Bible keeps flipping with the wind here. Verse 1 and 2, Psalms chapter 91, verse 1 and 2. You want to read it or you want me to read it?
You can read it.
No, you can read it. I talk too much.
He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in Him will I trust.
Now, I remember this verse so clearly.
It's actually beautiful.
When I was a young kid, my mom made us, me and my brothers, memorize this. She always found like some strong power in this chapter, Psalms chapter 91, and we memorized it. And I kept, every so often I reflect on these verses. But the reason why I want us to go through this verse and help us to understand through this verse the difference between faith and trust is because of this. It says that he that dwells in the secret place of the Most High. The secret place of the Most High is where? The most holy. All right? And as Jesus is interceding on our behalf in the most holy, we are supposed to be connected with him. We're supposed to follow after him. Revelation chapter 14 says that the last group of people that have faith and trust in God, they will follow the Lamb wherever he goes. And if we know that the Lamb is in the most holy, and we're to abide where he abides, and we are to go into the most holy spiritually and find out what it is that he desires of us within the most holy place. Now, there are some messages that I have in our ministry channel that it can explain what is actually taking place within the most holy, within the sanctuary itself, and what God desires of us, how the Ark of the Covenant has something to do with our protection for the last days, and how we're supposed to, as Noah's days, enter into the ark. We have to enter into a covenant relationship with God in the last days, and the Ark of the Covenant is symbolic of that covenant between us and God. So here it says that he that dwells in the secret place, so those that are within the presence of Jesus, abiding under his covenant with them, they will say of the Lord that he is their refuge and their fortress. They will also say what? What are those last words?
My God, in him will I trust.
So, does everyone say in the end that they trust God? Or is it only those that are abiding where Christ abides?
Only those that abide.
Only those that are in a covenant with God.
Yeah.
That are dwelling in the secret place of the Most High. That are dwelling in the most holy. That are under the shadow, the covering shadow of God. Under his grace, under his mercy, under his protection, during the time of difficulty, there's only a faithful few that will say, my God, in him will I trust. Why? Because the majority of people in this world will trust either in themselves or in the governing powers around the world. They will choose option A or option B, and only a few will choose option C. Now, if you're not connected with God, then you cannot trust God.
No,
Why is that? If you're not connected with God, you cannot trust God.
because in order for us to trust somebody, you have to have a connection with that person, or in this case, you have to have a relationship with God in order for you to trust.
Okay, so I'm going to ask this question. This is going to be our final question, and we're going to kind of explain this one and wrap it up. How do you fully trust God? Or how do you fully trust Jesus? Is it through problem solving on your own?
No, we already spoke about that.
Okay. So we
I
spoke about the yurt.
I think in my understanding, and in order for us to fully trust in God, is understand His will for us. What is that He wants from us? Because people say, "Oh, how do you know God wants you? How do you know God wanted you to go to Portugal? How do you know God wanted you to do this, this, and that?" Well, because first of all, we trust that we're doing God's will. We're leaving the cities. We are trying to prepare our land not for just for us, but for others that in the time of need or trouble will need.
So there are certain precepts that we have to follow. It's
Yeah,
not just blindly go out there and say, I'm going to do this because I think God is telling me to do this. No, there are certain precepts that the Bible indicates to us that we need to abide by, to follow in order to prepare ourselves for times of greater need. So once you check all those boxes, then you can kind of reflect and say, okay, if I'm checking all of these boxes, I'm agreeing with all of these things.
it's a God's
I'm
will.
wanting to follow all these things. I'm seeking after all these things. So yes, I am in God's will.
Yeah, but then
That doesn't necessarily mean that everything's falling into place yet.
yeah,
That just means that I'm in God's will.
but then let's just say that we're doing all this, and then oh, if it doesn't work out, we'll have a backup. We'll have a backup plan. Now, for me, that's not trusting in God.
So I'll give you an example. Moses, when he was in Egypt, he had this stirring in his heart by the Spirit that he was to somehow bring deliverance to the children of Israel while he was in Egypt, while he was an Egyptian. And he took matters into his own hands. And that caused him, the anger of his heart, it caused him to slay an Egyptian. And then he had to take refuge out of Egypt, and he went all the way to Midian, and he kind of settled there for a while. And then God called him back to Egypt. Now, when we look at Moses' life, when he was trying to do God's will his own way, it didn't work out, right?
No.
He had to flee. He had to run away. And then what happened? Because of that, he went all the way into the desert. Did he have an option to just come back whenever he pleased?
No.
What would happen if Moses decided I'm just gonna change my mind. Let me just go back. I have an alternative there.
They would have killed him.
Maybe I'll try and negotiate with them. They would have killed him. There was no chance, no turning back
Yeah.
for him, and he understood that. Once I do that, once I go, I gotta go all out, all the way. I can never turn back. On my own way, I can never turn back unless it's what God actually calls me to do. I can't do it. So he had to figure out life, moving forward and not moving backward. So, for example, we check all the boxes, right? And that means we know we're in God's will. And now you're moving forward. If you have this idea or this mentality that if things don't work out, I can always turn back, then is that really trusting in God?
No, that's
Or is that taking plan A and plan B?
That's what I said.
So I'll give you an example, and you get irritated with me all the time with this. Because many times you send me out to do groceries and you're very, very particular with your cooking. I love it. It's incredible. Delicious, fantastic. I married an excellent woman when it comes to cooking. However, there's a difficulty to that cooking. And the difficulty is she uses ingredients that I've never heard in my life. And in order to find those ingredients, you have to look in places that you don't even know exist in the stores.
He has to Google.
So I have to always be on my phone at the grocery store Googling to see what this thing looks like.
Well, now it's worse because it's Portuguese.
And then I have to translate it into Portuguese and try and find it in grocery stores in Portugal. And then I call her, I'm like, what is this supposed to be? What is this? Please explain it to me. And she's like, Jay, just ask someone to help you.
Not happening.
And I'm like, okay, okay, okay. And then I hang up. And then I call again for further explanation. She's like, did you ask anyone? I'm like, no, no, no. I got it figured out. And she gets so irritated because I never ask anyone for help. I always try and figure it out on my own. Most of the times I get it right. It takes me a little longer. I'm there at the store.
A lot longer.
Maybe
not
a half
little.
an hour trying to figure it out when I could just be 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I need to work on that. I do need to work on that. But there's a lesson to learn here that you can't be solving problems on your own if you're going to say you're trusting in God. We can't be solving the problems on our own because problems are going to come even in our life. We're doing all our things here. We planted trees. We have a garden going. We're starting construction. We're starting to build the ministry learning center. And it seems like everything's running smoothly, perfectly. Wow, it's such a blessing.
No, well, I'll just give an example. We had it figured out when we bought this property that we were going to get a shipping container, buy it, and then just store all our stuff. That did not happen because costly. It was just too
Well,
much.
the cost changed
Yeah,
from what we expected, and it was more than double.
So
And our route to our property, the shipping container wouldn't be able to turn into our property. So we wouldn't even be able to have one delivered to us. So we had to change the plan to build something instead because we were going to use that temporarily to store our stuff and then convert it into a building to make our learning center.
So what we did, we brought all our stuff here. I don't know how many drives. And we stored it in the house, which is obviously going to be the house that's going to be under construction. And now we had to figure a way of taking those stuff out again so that we could do the construction. So we had to build the other yurt, which God willing, he
Yurt
bought
number
two.
2.
And at the time I remember saying, why do we need 2 yurts? It's like, oh, you know what? Let's just get 2 yurts because you know what? It's always a good
You
thing.
see how God is in charge of everything.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. Why would we get two really big yurts that are the size to support an entire family each? And we thought, well, we're just one family.
We just need 1 yurt.
We just need 1 yurt, and we never imagined how God will use that other yurt for our necessities. We always thought, okay, we'll get an extra one. Maybe if someone ever were to come by as we're doing ministry and we have a place for them to stay and stuff like that, it's always, the convenience of having extra space.
Well, now that second yurt is with all our storage that we had to take out of the house
temporarily
into the yurt, so it doesn't look all, everything is going the way it's
so
not.
there's a lot of mess. There's a lot of chaos.
Yeah. Many people would have given up already.
However,
right?
In all this chaos, we just look at each other and we're just, I love you.
I don't know.
That's all we can say.
I don't know if I would do it if I would have done it again, to be honest, because I'm being honest.
And you know what? I think God leaves it like that. Leaves us not knowing, because had we known everything, we would be discouraged.
Yeah, we would have.
But as you're going through it and you look back and you see things how they fell into place, then you can trust in the next step, because God took care of this step. So if you do the next step, God is going to take care of the next one too, because he's already proven he could do it the last time. So as we're going without seeing, as we're moving in faith, it gives us the ability to trust for the next step.
Well, I think I'm at a point now where I'm like, okay, we got that figured out. And I look up and I'm like, okay, God, what do we have next? What's coming? It's almost like, it's not that it's going to stop, everything's going to be roses. No, there will always be something.
It's almost like you're anticipating problems.
Yeah, there will always be something, and you just have to, take it one day at a time, and whatever it is in God's will, and that's all I could say, right?
So many times we run into the risk of saying one of these two phrases, all right? Maybe he needs my help. Now, we don't actually say it, but we definitely think it. Maybe he needs my help, so we try and problem solve ourselves.
Oh.
Right? Or many people, or even we sometimes say, maybe I won't like his plan. So because we might not like the plan, we don't even explore it as an option.
Yeah.
We kind of try and ignore God or avoid God or pretend like we don't hear God's impressions on our heart, and try and stay away from it. So we avoid certain topics, avoid certain certain things to do just so that we don't go there.
Well, we didn't have this property as an option. This is our last option.
It wasn't even an option, to be
No.
honest with you. The real option was to buy a flat piece of land and just do a full construction of one of those modular wooden homes that
Yeah.
take like a couple of weeks to assemble.
Well,
Well, guess what? That wasn't God's plan. That was our plan. We presented it to God, and He
Yeah.
said flat out no.
Yeah.
We didn't understand why, but later on, when we went to explore our own plans, then God said, hold on, I didn't give you guys authorization to go forward with this plan. So He made us realize that if we were to go through with this plan, we were running the risk of losing all our money, not getting a home, having someone take off with our money, because what's been happening here in Portugal regularly is people have been opening up these companies for these prefabricated homes, gathering deposits and taking off with the money. There's a lot of scams going on here.
Yeah.
But God has led us past all of that trouble and said, okay, I'm going to give you something that looks a little more difficult from your eyes, but if you move forward in faith and trust me, it'll work out better for you in the end. And would you say that this property turned out for our good?
I love it.
You see, the Bible talks about Joseph, how his brothers meant everything for evil,
And God
but what
turned
they
it
meant for
around.
evil, God
God
turned
it
to
for
good.
Yeah.
We bought this property, and without knowing, there were a lot of hidden problems here.
Yeah.
And we actually have a video coming out soon on our other YouTube channel platform showing a major issue with the septic system, something that we were never able to anticipate. And we looked at that situation and we almost wanted to cry. We were ready to panic, but we remembered that God led us here. And if God led us here, He was aware of this situation already. And He already has a solution for us. Therefore, we have to just do what we can do to resolve the situation and trust that God is going to take care of us. God is going to provide for us. Well, guess what? We found temporary solutions to help us live through the condition. So we praise God for that. And He's guiding us through the steps to resolve the problem. So instead of looking at the cup half empty, you kind of look at the cup half full, and that gives you the ability to start trusting in God with everything in your life. Not just when things go good, but even when things go bad. So I want to give an example here of the solution on how to fully trust God. All right? And basically it's through this, and it's how I wanted to explain in the beginning of how do I know, or what was the first question? How much do you trust God? All right, that's the first question you asked me, right? And this is how I wanted to explain it, but I was going to leave it for the end. If I were to tell you, Karina, let's give a hypothetical situation here. There was an emergency in our life, and we had to leave our kids with someone to babysit them for a time. We don't know how long, but there's an emergency and there's no other solution, because everyone knows, basically everyone that knows us knows that we're not a family that like to babysit. Our kids stay with us as much as possible. They're going to be with us. But if there were an emergency and we absolutely had to, without choice, who would you call to babysit, and why? Is there someone particular in your head? You don't have to say who, just not to offend anyone else. But
okay.
Is there someone specific that you would call to babysit your kids? Your own children?
Yes and no.
Yes and no. Okay,
Yeah.
me too.
Yes and no.
There are certain people in my life, in our life, that I would call. All right? And others that I flat out I wouldn't call in an emergency. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is there's 3 points that I want to make real quick. All right? How do you know, or why would you call this person in the emergency to babysit our kids? The first one is this: you know them personally, right?
Yeah.
You personally know that person, that's why you would call them. You wouldn't call a stranger to take care of your kids, right? You know that person is dependable. So if you call them, you know they'll answer and they'll be there.
Yeah.
They'll be able to take care of their kids. They'll drop whatever needs to be dropped in order to take care of their kids. They're dependable. So you know them personally and they're dependable. And the third one is that they're for you. What does that mean, they're for you? It means this: they will care for your kids, or they will care for our kids as if we were caring for our kids. So, whatever lessons or morals that we apply with our children, they're not just going to break those and just let our kids go free for all like lunatics just because we're not around. If we don't let our kids do something, we know that if we leave our kids with that person or those people, they will do the same things. They will treat our kids the way we treat our kids. They will follow the same rules. If we have these rules, they're going to apply those same rules with our kids. So they will care for them as we do. So they look out for us. So those are the three things that if we're looking for a babysitter in an emergency, this is why we would call this person. All right? And all these three things basically just come down to trust. You would call this person because you trust them. Why do you trust them? Because you know them personally, they're dependable, and they're going to do exactly what you do. These are all actions, things that, on a day-to-day basis, you get involved in. And this is how it is with God. If you want to fully trust in God, all right, you need to basically go through these 3 steps. You need to know Him personally. We need to understand that He is dependable. If you're going to trust Him, you need to understand He is dependable.
Yeah.
And He's for you. He's looking out for you. No matter what. He's not going to try and do something different, contrary to what's good for you. He's going to always do what's best for you. And when we understand that concept, then we can start trusting in God and leaving our life in His hands, because that's basically what it is. We're taking our life and we're letting Jesus babysit us.
Yeah.
In the end, if you really reflect on it, God, take care of my life because I can't take care of it myself. So can you take care of my life? Be my babysitter for me because I know you. I know you're dependable and I know you're looking out for the best of me. And when we think of those things in the sense of God, then we can trust Him, because trusting in God is an act and a practice. It's not a thought or a feeling. So I want you to conclude with I have a little quote here. I forgot where I got it from. I just had it written down somewhere, so I don't have the context of it. But it's a great quote that it's worth mentioning before we close here. So can you just read that to wrap things up for us?
So it says,
nice, loud and clear for everyone to hear.
The next time something goes wrong or you feel like the rug has been pulled out from under you, you have a choice. You can panic and try to fix everything yourself, or you can practice active trust by pausing, praying, and seeking God for the solution before you make your next move. You can take a deep breath and let your shoulders relax, because your Father knows your every need before you even have it.
All right, guys. We want you to reflect on those last few words. Trust in God. Take a deep breath. Leave your life in His hands and let Him deal with the rest. We hope that you've been blessed by this episode here on Time to Shine, the podcast. And until next time, take care
and trust.
God bless you all.
Bye for now.